Welcome to the CU2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Could this really be the end? For going on 20 years, I've heard screams, usually emanating from one particular trade group, that the credit union's tax exemption was in peril. I thought that was a terrific membership renewal hook, but didn't see any likelihood of passage. This year is different. This year, the threat is real. On the show is Jason Stverak, Chief Advocacy Officer at DCUC, the Defense Credit Union Council, whose membership includes the nation's biggest credit unions, but also smaller ones too. All primarily serve military active duty and retirees. DCUC has not been the association with a long history of yelling about the possible loss of tax exemption, but Stverak says that indeed, now the threat is real. He also explains what the impact on DCUC credit unions would be were the tax exemption to go away. And the impacts would be sizable, harmful both to credit union members and the communities in which DCUC members operate. In a recent show, one-time Bethpage CEO Kirk Kordeleski warned that credit unions, if they lost a tax exemption, would also lose their business model. That is terrible news. There's a link to Kordeleski's show in the show notes. On this show, we hear exactly what that would mean for defense-related credit unions. It's ugly, man, ugly. By the way, how much money do you think would be saved were the tax exemption to go away? $3 billion. $3 billion. That's chump change in today's Washington, D.C. Heck, Elon Musk personally has 50 times, 60 times more money than that. Hear how DCUC is fighting back in this show. By the way, 4 years ago, DCUC CEO Tony Hernandez, U.S. Air Force retired, was on the show. Hear his episode here. There's a link in the show notes. Could this really be the end? The CU2.0 podcast.
For 20 years, I've been hearing credit union tax exemption is threatened. For 20 years, I've been covering credit union. For 19 of those years, I said to myself, and many people agreed with me, wow, this is a really effective membership renewal platform for a big credit union trade association, one whose name does not begin with the letter D.
Yeah.
But nothing's ever going to come of this. Nothing to worry about. Something seems different today. Am I swallowed the paranoid fluid or something, man? Yeah.
No, there's I'll probably say it, but I kind of live by the motto of former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Congress is where things go slow until they go fast. So you've got to be ready for things to go fast.
Why suddenly does it seem as though there's actual momentum for this?
There's a lot of things. I mean, DC's really different right now. There is a top to bottom re-examination of, from the new administration on how to do things. So people are questioning, and it's a steady drumbeat of we've had, let's just say, adverse headlines that has kind of fed into that story. I was talking to a couple Ways and Means staffers this morning, and they're all like, "What is it with you guys buying banks?" And I'm not saying,
but there's just a handful of it, man. Just
exactly. And I was like, well, you have no problem when U.S. Bank buys out half the banks in North Dakota, but it's just like, it's that. I know it's weird. It's the naming rights. Well, then they don't have a problem when Citibank's getting billions in TARP money naming Citi Field for the New York Mets. So you have the ABA and the ICBA continually pushing on the issue. You have many former community bankers who are sitting on House Financial Services, Senate Banking. It's an issue that they continually push, and they're very effective on it. It's just when you have about every month a story about a credit union going into a consent decree, or CNN headline about not doing loans for minorities, that it's adding up. And so you've lost trust with our traditional allies, and you're feeding ammunition to the people who are not happy unless credit unions go away. So it's kind of like multiple things are coming together in a perfect storm.
Now, I'm told, and you would know whether this is accurate or not, I don't, that many of the old, reliable credit union voices in the House and Senate have retired.
That's true.
There's a changing of the guard. There were a number of guys who were, they believed in credit unions as much as Jim Blaine from State Employees. So, and you didn't have to argue with them. They would have done anything to stop this, a change in the tax exempt status. And they knew how to work. They were longtime players. They knew how to play the game.
Yeah.
And they're gone. So that's true.
That's true. I mean, we were doing kind of on the back of a napkin kind of estimation of, when was the last big tax fight, and how many members of Congress, and as importantly, their staff that have turned over. And a conservative estimate was probably 70 to 75% of Congress has not gone through this fight, has not had to live it. And so when you haven't experienced something or had to go through it, it may look like the greatest idea out there, and it actually isn't. And that's where we in the credit union movement have to get our credit union champions together to educate members, their staff, the people that influence each of those groups, talking about this is not a fight you want to go down, talking about the benefits of the credit union difference of what we're doing in communities, and make sure they understand that this is not an easy choice of, hey, we're going to go find $3 billion to pay for X. It's, you vote yes, you're going to devastate your local community.
Why are you the loudest voice on this from the credit union side?
It's incredibly important to our members. We saw months.
Why aren't there other loud voices?
I don't know. We know that the impact it will have on our members' ability to serve the military, it would be absolutely devastating. That we would not be able to, provide additional access to capital, low interest loans, the help we do on installations to take care of military families when a spouse or a member is deployed to help take care of those families. Those would be taken away from us. And for many of our members in the boards of directors or former active duty, it's personal. It's family that is being impacted. And we're going to continually be the loudest voice out there. And we're encouraging everybody, every credit union leader, every credit union CEO, every credit union teller that's a part of the Defense Credit Union Network or throughout the entire credit union industry, to make their voice heard, that, threatening and removing the credit union tax status, it would be devastating to the credit union. But more importantly, it'd be devastating to the communities that we serve.
Just ballpark. Let's say the credit union tax exemption is eliminated. How much money would be involved there?
Well, I mean, the estimate is overall it's $3 billion a year. I mean, that's
nothing. Washington D.C. This is lunch money, man.
It is. It is. I mean, it's a rounding error at DOD.
But it could be devastating to credit unions, from what I hear from people, longtime CEOs of credit unions, and they're not kidding around.
No, they're not.
Major business model change.
That changing the tax status not only will eliminate many of the programs that we do for underserved and unserved communities, for many mid and small credit unions, this will be the difference between keeping the doors open. So if you want less hours, you want fewer brick and mortars, you want more banking deserts, then pass the tax status. But if you want a robust and viable, all of the above financial community accessible to every American across the country, then you need to stand up and speak out and fight for keeping the credit union tax status.
And many of those credit unions, Navy Federal most certainly included, recognize that a significant number of the active service military they serve are relatively low income. These are not high income colonels and generals. The bulk are relatively low income people.
Yeah, and it's not just Navy; it's Penn Fed. It's Randolph Brooks. To small credit unions. Hickam out in Hawaii. You're right. The majority of the members that we serve are enlisted, lower. In the enlisted ranks. It's if you look at it, it's a pyramid. The higher you go up, there are fewer colonels than there are majors, and there are fewer generals than there are colonels. So,
well, you retire as a colonel because you've been told you ain't never going to be a general.
Exactly.
And that is most of the colonels. The majority of the colonels are said, "Hey, it's time to send your resume out."
No, you're 100% right, and it impacts the veterans communities as well. Is when you go out, our defense credit unions like to talk about being part of that financial life cycle from from the moment you come in to the moment you leave to your career out of the service. We want to be your partner throughout that entire time frame, and eliminating that tax status means that we're going to help fewer people. And you have to also know and understand, the military and joining the military for a lot of Americans and their families, whether it's rural America where I'm from or inner city or the suburbs, it's their way to improve their life, to improve their economic status. And you're going to have the most diverse group of Americans, every race, creed, all coming together in service of their country. And we want to make sure that they're served adequately or their needs are met in the financial services sector.
Now, are the big money center banks, the Chases, do they have a dog in this fight, or are their dogs wrapped up in the kennel and they're not coming in it?
I mean, in all honesty,
I personally don't think Chase.
I don't think. I think when Chase makes as much profit one quarter as the entire credit union, industry, can make an entire year. I don't think that it cares, but their members do care about it. So when their members, the ABA, it's primarily a talking point and an issue for the ICBA. You just had the Make Community Banking Great hearing in Chairman Hill's committee in the House Financial Services Committee, and the president of the ICBA in her prepared testimony, referenced, the unfairness of the tax status for credit unions. There was no mention, as we like to point out, there was no discussion of the fact that many banks, I think up to a third of them, go through subchapter S, and a rapid depreciation, so they don't pay taxes. So I think sometimes the argument isn't a full discussion, and it only focuses on the current credit union tax status. And we can talk about the credit union difference and the great things that we do to justify that. But it's always swept under the rug how banks use and game the IRS tax code to minimize and in many cases eliminate their tax bill.
But I would think the majority of community banks pay extremely little in federal tax.
I would think
that's why you pay CPAs. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong.
Hey, I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong either. But if we're going to have that robust discussion on taxes that financial institutions do or do not pay, let's have a full, honest, and robust discussion, because there is a large chunk of banks that don't pay any taxes at all.
You touched on this, but give me a little bit more elaboration.
Okay.
Let's say that the tax exemption is removed. What are some real life consequences that your members would impose upon their members?
I think you're going to have an almost immediate rollback in access to credit and capital, whether it's small business loans, whether it is access to credit and capital, for younger members of the population that are just going into the military. They're not.
And some military credit unions have been really great about extending what I would view as risky loans on, say, motorcycles to active duty enlisted people.
Right. And we
and I would look at that loan, unless you were my brother, I'm not lending you the money.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'd rather have them come to us than some of the unscrupulous payday loan lenders and some of those used dealerships, as we soon that have targeted members of the military. I think you're going to see, an incredible rollback on that. I think you're going to see a reduction, just because a reduction in the amount of services provided. The changing on free checking options, because the credit union is going to have to look at its bottom line, because there's a new additional expense. That how do we balance the books? And then it's going to be there may have to be a reduction in staff. They may have to cut down the number of branches. They may have to cut down the number of hours. If you're a service member spouse and you're working a part-time job as your spouse is deployed, and you're out picking up your children, and the credit union is going to close at 3 instead of 5, and you can't get there to deposit a check or withdraw cash, then it's going to make life infinitely more difficult on the active duty service members and their families, for them to accomplish the normal task that they need to be a part of the American economy.
Now, when you say that to members of Congress and the Senate and their staff, do they go, oh hum, or do they take this seriously?
Many of them take it seriously. The unique benefit and the voice that we speak from, not only on behalf of credit unions, but on behalf of the credit unions that serve those who serve America, is incredibly powerful. I was just up in a meeting this morning with Senator Andy Kim's staff, Democrat from New Jersey, and we were talking about interchange rates, and it's comparable in the fact that it's a changing interchange. It would be like removing our tax status. It would be a reduction, an additional expense, or reduction in revenue for the credit union. And you're talking about explaining what it means to that 18-year-old that we can't give a credit card to, or that we can't take the risk on, where they don't have any credit history, but because of our tax status, we have that ability to serve those that the banks have chosen not to serve. We're not going to be able to do that anymore. And I give them the real world example of what we're doing is just opening up the front gates of the base and marching them right out in front to the payday loan lenders, because they're going to be more than happy to give them a $200 or $300 payday loan at 400 or 500% interest.
Well, I know Navy Federal used to. I don't know if they still do, but I imagine they do. They had a pretty good program where if they said no to your loan application, they said, now, if you work with us for a year, we'll help you, and we will almost certainly, if you listen to us and do what we say, almost certainly approve your loan application a year from now. It's time and money. That's not free.
It does. It is not free. And in most defense credit unions and most credit unions overall do that for those individuals because of our unique cooperative member-owned structure, and us not paying taxes. We are able to take those resources and not worry about profit, but invest in those people and those individuals, so that maybe a year from now, because of financial literacy training and helping them budget, maybe they've never had to do a budget before, but we can get them the loans that they need, or we can get them that $300 loan so they can fix their car, so we're not sending them out to predatory lenders. That's the credit union difference. Credit unions are 20 to 25% more likely than banks to give a $200 to a $5,000 loan. That's what most people are looking for. Hey, I have something unexpected that came up. Can you help me get through? That's what credit unions are here for.
Right. And if you walk into your local Chase and say, look, would you give me a loan for $5,000? I got a pretty good job. They'd say, get the hell out of here. We don't do $5,000 loans. Put it on your credit card, man.
The paperwork isn't worth it to them.
No.
But it is for a credit union. And it is.
No, credit union is also doing this for educational purposes.
Yes. Yeah.
Are they actually making money on that $5,000 loan? They can't be.
No.
I'm not saying
Most
they're
of them
losing a
don't.
lot, but
Well,
they're hoping, hey, if we teach this dude how to handle his $5,000 loan, then we'll make him a $25,000 car loan. Then we'll give him a mortgage. He's going to be lifelong, very profitable customer for us.
right, and that's what I talked about, that financial life cycle as our defense credit unions see that, taking them from that first, that first PAL loan to the car loan to the home loan to helping them save for their kids' college, to transitioning out, to finding that second job, to providing a small business loan, into retirement. That's what's so incredibly important there. And you also have to understand that another impact that would make on credit unions is that for the defense credit unions that are on base, that are on the installations, there are additional costs that we assume because we want to serve those members. In terms of, we're required by the contracts we sign with DoD to have financial training and resources available for any member that walks in, any personnel that walks in. We are required that on many bases as they deploy, that we're sending our war fighters into places around the globe that you can't use an Amex or a Visa or a MasterCard. So we need to take a pallet of cash with us. So we need to have $5 or $6 million sitting in the vault that can go on the C-17 when we're deploying into a combat zone to pay. So there are additional costs that others don't incur, that if we lose those tax statuses, they're not going to be able to likely stay on that base to serve those members of the armed services in person.
I know from a conversation with him that your CEO, in fact, was involved in some deployments and putting together big suitcases full of money to get ATM machines to work essentially simultaneous with the arrival of the troops into distant lands.
That's exactly right. Yeah. There are a lot, but those stories are repeated by at credit union after credit union that is an installation after installation across the country and across the globe, because they have to ensure that the financial readiness of the troops personally does not impact the military readiness of the troops, so they can deploy without a worry.
Yeah, so you're making an excellent point, which is that having an on-base branch isn't all sweetness, that there's some extra cost involved in maintaining that branch.
Yeah, and for many of them, if you ask them, it costs more to be on base than off base because of some of those items that I listed, but they do it because they want to serve those that serve America, because it's part of their mission. It's part of that greater credit union DNA, and it's part of that greater. We've been part of this, this base or this fort or this port for 60, 70, 80, 90 years. Our futures are tied together, and we sink or swim together.
You're a poker player. You're going to tell me what I'm about to ask you doesn't exist. But we'll see.
Okay.
Were this legislation to begin to proceed as though it's going to happen, in other words, tax exemption is going away, what's the quid pro quo that credit unions want? There has to be something.
I don't think there is something that you could put on the table that would equal the fundamental change in our structure, in our DNA. I don't think, member business lending or field of member expansion, people throw those things around, but you are fundamentally, and I down to the smallest molecule DNA of what it means to be a credit union, changing it by changing the tax status, because you're going to force that institution to change how it treats its members And for us, that's the members of the military. From that point forward, you're forcing them to become a bank. You're forcing them to put profit over the people that they serve. And for many credit union leaders, that is too high of a cost to pay, a bridge too far, whatever analogy you want to use. And that is not a future that many of them want to participate in. And that is why we have been speaking as loudly as we can, as often as we can, to as many people as we can about our worries about the threats to the credit union tax status.
I was told by a pretty well-informed credit union, former CEO of a big credit union, who told me if this were to happen, he was pretty sure some of the biggest credit unions, including some of your members, would demutualize. They would stop being credit unions, because that would be the rational thing if your business model has been changed so radically. He said the best path forward would be to just stop being a credit union.
And there would many that have to have that discussion. You'd also have an incredible amount of consolidation. If you want to get rid of a large majority of the small and medium-sized credit unions in the country, change their tax status, because they will not be able to stay open, and you will dramatically increase the amount of banking deserts across this country, and you will dramatically increase the populations of unserved Americans, whether they're in rural America or inner cities or wherever, that no one will go and want to, because it's not profitable to serve them. Like you talked about with walking into Chase and wanting to do a $5,000 loan, it's not profitable for them. But for a credit union, that is the mission of why we're there.
When asked how many small credit unions, and let's define small as under 100 million or under 200 million, something like that in assets. And that's the majority of credit unions. This is not just a handful of guys. The Navy Federals are outliers.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
How many of those quote small, close quote credit unions would actually wind up having to pay taxes? I know their accounting expenses would go through the roof.
I'm not sure, but they'll have to pay something. There will be significant, as you mentioned, internal costs, accounting, and I'm sure a CPA could help them find. But they're going to then be more. They're going to have to expend resources, time, talent, and treasure to limit their tax exposure, rather than putting that money into lower loan rates, higher interest rates for deposits, or serving their community. And is that a trade-off I don't think credit unions want to make?
Well, now I've worked years ago for very big companies, and many of their decisions are a factor in the decision is tax implications. In other words, if we do this and we get this tax break, well, let's do this because it looks better than doing this other thing where we're going to have to pay taxes. Credit unions would have to start thinking that way.
And that would be wrong, because then you're chasing the tax write-off, and you're not doing what credit unions do now and chasing the investment in the person, like you mentioned. But the program that you referenced at Navy Federal of, hey, let's sit down and spend time and talent and treasure here at this credit union to get you to a point in 1 year where you can get that car loan. No bank's going to do that. No. And you are then going to push the marginalized and the underserved and the unserved out of the door of the credit union and say, go somewhere else. And in 9 times out of 10, it's going to be predatory lenders, and you're just going to put them into that indentured servitude of a cycle of debt that they can never get out of.
And many of your members, I think, are still looking at new members for themselves as basically lifelong members, yes. Basically assets. Whereas if you open an account at a local community bank, what's the life expectancy of that account? I'm sure they have numbers, but it's not lifelong. It's a handful of years. And same thing with the money center banks. It's but with Navy Federal, et cetera, they're hoping that they will do good work and you will be with them from 18 to when you die. It's
No, that's the goal, and not in a bad way. It's about great customer service. It's
yeah,
like
no,
it's I will stay at a branch, or I will stay at a credit union, or I'll as my late father always bought the car from the same dealership because he was treated well and he felt comfortable, and they knew his name and they respected him and they welcomed his family. So that type of mentality where you put the person, and I know it's it's a cliche to say, where you put the person and their needs over the immediate profit, you're going to have a customer for life or a member for life.
but you can't be spending a lot of money on things like taxes to have the comfort to think in that way.
Right. If you have put the profit over the person, you're going to have a fundamental change in how credit unions will operate, because they will be chasing paying the tax or finding the next tax write-off or tax credit, rather than, you know what, let's invest in, let's give this individual who's got a marginal credit score or no credit score a car loan because we believe in them in the long term. And it may not work out, but 8 times out of 10 it has. We're going to roll the dice.
When do you think this decision will be made in Congress? In other words, if there's legislation, when's it going to happen by?
I don't know when legislation will be introduced. I assume there will be. I think that as Congress regular order, or if you remember from the 70s, the Schoolhouse Rock, I'm only a bill, and in that process, that doesn't happen in Washington much anymore. So this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to worry about, because you've got the budget reconciliation talks coming up, where once they set the budget numbers and they do the reconciliation bills to extend the Trump tax cuts, put some more no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security benefits. As we're discussing taxes, people are like, yes, it's $3 billion, but we need $3 billion to pay for this. That could get thrown in as a part of the mix.
That could be a footnote.
It could be a footnote. That's where
the reconciliation bill is bigger than your tall.
That's exactly right. And what happens?
There are a lot of little footnotes in there. That $3 billion. That's a fine footnote.
Yeah, that's fine. What happens at 3:00 in the morning? We were, we saw the reporting that was done by CU today, where they found the whole 55-page list of potential pay-fors, meaning if you do X, you'll get X amount of money for revenue that you could then offset what you want to do. And the credit union tax status was on there. We've had members of the Republican members of the Ways and Means Committee, Claudia Tenney at the ABA last November, December, talk about examining the credit union tax status. So more than in the past, it is being discussed. You had Paul Ryan, former Speaker of the House, talk at ACU's Congressional Caucus that the credit union tax status is going to get discussed. And,
did Ryan say he supported that?
I don't know if he didn't say he supported it. It's just that it's going to be in the discussion.
Ryan's a pretty smart guy, in my opinion.
He knows the process. And you have the Doge movement here in DC right now. You've had the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. So, that have talked about streamlining and finding efficiencies, et cetera, so that there is a greater than in the past opportunity or arena for these discussions to happen. And that is why we have been as loudly as we can talking about this is not something that should be looked at. We have been doing as much education as possible to members, new members, old members, new staffers, moving to other offices about the credit union difference and the incredibly negative impact it would have on defense credit unions and our ability to serve our nation's military and veterans if you do this.
Yeah, I think you obviously know this world much better than I do, but I think what I'd have nightmares about is that at 3:00 in the morning, the reconciliation bill is gone, and someone says, "Hey, we need another $3 billion." I got this language right here. It's about a paragraph. It's not going to take very long. We'll just stick that in there. And then as votes come down, 90% of the people who vote will not know that's in there. And everybody wakes up the next day and say, what the hell happened?
And
But hey, I didn't vote for that. Yeah, you did vote for it. But
you did. It was on page 712. Well, the bill was only 650 pages when I went to bed. Well, we added a few things. So that happens all the time. So that is why we're standing watch. We're trying to be as vigilant as possible. We are sending as many letters as possible, in-person meetings. Our CEOs, our advocacy champions at every defense credit union, even asking the tellers to make phone calls, to send emails, to tell them, don't do this. This is what will happen in real life, not some theoretical, not something from, Cato or a think tank saying, well, you'll get X amount of dollars. It needs to be translated into, in your community, the people that vote for you, this is going to be the negative impact.
And credit union, as you know, is a not-for-profit institution. Yep. That, because they pay no taxes, that does not benefit any shareholders at all. There are no shareholders to benefit.
That's correct. Yep.
Who does it benefit? If it benefits anybody, it benefits the members. And then in your case, the members are military or retired military.
Yep.
And do you really want to shortchange these people?
No, I mean, if you go through it, the members of the military are incredibly underpaid. That's not a secret. They sacrifice so much, not only them, but their spouses and their children and their entire families, that the commitment that we feel, that our members feel to their members, who are the servicemen, the veterans and their families, is enormous. And using the resources that we have as defense credit unions because of our tax status, we reinvest back into them. We reinvest into better loan rates. We reinvest into taking risks on those who are on a moment's notice willing to lay their life down to protect our freedoms. That is not something we think members of Congress in the end want to get rid of, and we want to make sure they know that this is the choice that is in front of them.
Has anybody put on the table sort of a CFPB option, which is, okay, let's take the tax status away from $10 billion and up credit unions? There's only like 15 of them or 20 of them, but yeah, that's so those big credit unions are under a lot of CFPB regulation.
There is that. I am sure that it's the wanting credit unions to negotiate against themselves. And is it 10 billion? Is it 8 billion? Is it 5 billion? And then next year, well, maybe it needs to go down to 5 billion, and then 4 billion, and then 3 billion. Well, then the year after that, maybe it should just be $1 billion. And then, why don't we just get rid of you altogether? It's that my worry is
a slippery slope. That
slippery slope that you are saying that the mission is important up to $10 billion. Then above that, it's profit over people. Whether it's Navy Federal, Penn Fed, ViStar, Randolph Brooks, down to Schofield or Hickam in Hawaii, from the largest to the smallest, from Global to Penn Air, etc., that the mission happens regardless of the size of the assets in the credit union. So putting a price tag on that, I've never been a believer in. And the fact that it's Navy, it's Penn Fed, it's the smallest credit unions as well, in defense credit unions that are doing the same thing every single day, using that tax status to invest in those 18-year-old high school graduates, teenagers that have decided that they're going to make service to their country their first choice, a voluntary decision that 95% plus of this country will not agree with or make the same decision as they will, that we're going to hamstring the institutions that are asking to help them move forward. and it's not a choice I am willing to put on the table or right now. I'd be remiss if I didn't extend a thank you for every one of our CEOs and VPs and tellers and loan officers for everything they do every single day to try to find that opportunity to serve. Though it's a phrase we use here, serve those who serve our country. They come in on extra hours, they volunteer on the weekends because they know that these people are doing so much for them every single day, and their activities go largely unnoticed and unthanked. And I just like to use an opportunity just to say thank you to every single defense credit union and every credit union that has a veteran, which is every credit union in this country, to thank them for everything they do to help these populations of people.
Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey again. That's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU2.0 podcast.